Everyone for joining. We've reached the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started and kick off today's webcast. Moving a little slow. There we go. So yes, unique from our other webcasts, the Digital Transformation in Action webinar series highlights case studies for procurement and P2P technology solutions. So hear from other organizations that have implemented and understand how these tools enable their success. A little slow to move. There we go. So just before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. All lines have been muted to ensure call quality for today's presentation. We're recording the session and you'll receive an email with the presentation deck and recording link after today's event within 48 to 72 hours. If you're in need of technical assistance, please message the host through the Zoom chat feature. And to view the presentation in full screen mode, click on the full screen icon in the upper right-hand corner, and this will enable full screen access. And at the bottom of your screen, you will find the main control panel. And from here, you can access the Q&A feature to submit questions. Attendees of today's webcast are eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit. In order to receive CPE credit, the attendee must be present for a minimum of 50 minutes, participate in all polling questions, as well as complete the webcast survey, which will pop up in a separate internet browser tab once the webcast is finished and you've closed out of Zoom. The learning objectives for today's webcast are to review the value drivers related to supplier onboarding and supplier management, to discuss an approach for transforming supplier onboarding and supplier management process, to understand the critical success factors and hurdles associated with such an improvement effort, and to review the value delivered from greater automation of these processes. Next, we have a list of our upcoming engagements, including our webcasts, roundtables, and open performance studies. And our next webcast is on maximizing value in source to pay, how to transform agreement processes with CLM, and that'll be on November 13th. These webcasts are currently posted on Hackett Connect and are available to register. So if you haven't done so yet, please make sure to register, and we look forward to seeing you there. Now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kurt Albertson, Principal Procurement Advisory and North American Practice Lead, to get the webcast started. Kurt, over to you.
Thanks, Holly. Appreciate the kickoff there, and very excited about today's session. This is probably one of the hottest topics that we have been talking to with our client base over the last probably year and a half, couple of years. So, that's supplier onboarding process, right? Of getting our new suppliers ready to be used and all the risk activities and cybersecurity due diligence we have to go through, right? Quite a process these days. So look forward to hearing the discussion between Conrad and Ian, who we'll introduce here shortly. Let me kind of kick things off here just with a poll question, right? So we wanted to kind of get some perspectives here to kind of set the tone for this discussion we're going to be having. And I see that Holly has executed the poll, so thank you. Just a real quick question, and pay attention here. What we're asking on this question is, what do you think your stakeholders' expectations are for the average number of business days to onboard a typical supplier? So not how long it takes you, but what is your expectation? What do we think your stakeholders, your internal customers' expectations are, right? When they, they're ready to use a supplier, they're ready to get moving here on some type of project or some type of, looking for some type of material, but we got to get the supplier onboarded. What do we think their expectations are? Same day, 2 to 5 days, 6 to 10 business days, 11 to 18, 19 plus, or really not sure. It'd be interesting to get your perspectives here. I don't know about you, Ian and Conrad, but I'm I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what we think the expectations are here from folks.
Yeah, I don't want to influence what people are saying, but I have my guesses. I tried to vote, but it won't let me vote here on the background. So
yeah, this tends to be one of those. It's interesting. I've had, I was traveling this week and on site with a couple of clients, and this idea of the fact that stakeholders, our internal business partners, a lot of times just don't understand, the kind of what goes on in this source to settle process. They don't understand kind of why things take time, right? It's just let me use who I want to use and get out of my way seems to be the attitude sometimes. So, okay, so interesting results. Thank you for showing those, Holly. We've got about a quarter saying same day. Yeah, I kind of expected a lot of people to kind of say, yeah, they want it now. They don't want to wait. 2 to 5 days. Okay. That's somewhat, I can understand that. About 37% said that, and the remaining are 6+ days. So the majority, almost 2/3 are basically saying, look, we want to be able to get these suppliers onboarded and used within either the same day or certainly within kind of the 3 to 5 day kind of time frame. Does that surprise you, Conrad? Ian?
Not at all.
Well, for me, actually, I'm surprised that it isn't 100% on the top 2 lines, because and maybe it's the question here, but sometimes expectations are based on performance. Like, hey, you'll hear in Ian's story just how long it was taking, but if they're accustomed to getting 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of a process, then that's kind of their expectations, right? But is the next poll coming up right away? Because I have a little story to tell, but I don't want to influence the numbers here.
Yeah, you're right. I probably should have changed the question to what do you think your stakeholders' wish list is?
Yeah, what do they want? What do they want?
There you go.
But I think it demonstrates the point. Stakeholders want to use suppliers quickly, and they don't understand why they have to wait in many cases. All right, so let's that was kind of the expectation, but let's ask a similar question, but let's kind of actually kind of try to understand what is the actual average number of business days today that it takes to actually onboard a typical supplier within your organization. So the first was, what are their expectations, or what would be their desired cycle time? And this one is, how long does it actually take? So let's go ahead and respond to that. We have data at Hackett, so I could probably answer this question. So we'll see how representative the participants on this webcast are to our actual data. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll get same day for this one. Who knows? Maybe we've got some really advanced customers out there.
Well, looking at this question while the answers are coming in, I think my story won't influence this too much. But I just scanned through the attendee list, and I recognize many of you from conferences that we've attended. And if you've seen us at conferences in the last couple of years, we show up with our F1 like pit crew jerseys, and we have an F1 simulator. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, what is up with the crazy Graphite guys over here? Like, everybody else is in suits and ties and acting respectable, and they're playing games with their simulator. It's a really cool metaphor, because I'm totally into F1 now. I mean, Netflix Drive to Survive has taken me down that path. And if you think about what it takes to win in business, like all of us in the back office, and I don't mean this to offend anybody, but I had a friend that worked at Pepsi, and he said, either you're in the game or you're keeping score. And Conrad, you're in procurement, you're just keeping score. And that offended me, honestly. I was like, what are you talking about? We're doing so much great work, we're saving money. And he was in sales, he had his opinion. But when you are winning business every day, when you're out there on the front lines, and I feel kind of what that is these days in my role, you know exactly what it takes to win. And that driver, the F1 driver, knows exactly what winning is in the race. And in procurement in the back office, we're kind of the pit crew, right? So when the business pulls in that they need help, with what they're trying to accomplish, they pull into the pit stop, and the way we serve them is a very, very direct impact on their ability to win. And there's, if you watch F1, there's almost nothing, especially this year, it's super competitive. There's almost nothing as impactful as thinking you're going to get a 2-second pit stop when you get in there, because that's the current time to do it, to change 4 tires and get them back through that process is 2 seconds. Like in 1950, it took 17 seconds to change 2 tires, and now they're doing 4 tires in 2 seconds.
Well,
right.
Being from the South, Conrad, I'm more of a NASCAR guy, but I get your analogy.
I said 17. I meant 70. 70 seconds to change 2 tires. So whether it's NASCAR or F1 or any of these sports, the transformation of that pit stop has been revolutionary. So, you know, I think in procurement, we got to keep our mind on that, right? Like I think they expect 2 seconds. They expect same day. And a lot of that isn't practical or a good idea. But you got to ask yourself, is it? This sounds too silly, right? Honestly, I'm saying all this in the spirit of really procurement as a function. We for too many years, we've said it has to be, it can be fast or it can be safe, right? Fast or safe. And all of these race car sports have actually increased the speed of the pit stop, increased the speed of the vehicles, and made the whole sport safer at the same time. And so I think that's the magic of how we need to look at not just this, but all the other stuff we're doing in our business. Can we be fast and take care of all the risk and due diligence stuff you were talking about before, Kurt?
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's see the results. Okay, so there are some that are pretty good, 2 to 5 days, living up to those expectations, about a quarter. And the rest, you know, I say we've got about 40% that are under 10 days, and then about the other 60% are 11 plus. That's about what I would have expected based on the data that we collect at the Hackett Group for this process. Does any surprises there, Conrad, or is that about what you would expect?
Well, I guess I would say the lower numbers there, and there's a blend of what happens here as well. We talk to a lot of teams that do commercial data registration, and that's something that you can still do pretty quickly. I think as Ian tells his story in a few minutes, you'll get that apples to apples, getting through a cybersecurity review, getting through a privacy review, getting through a financial viability review, getting through all these reviews in using traditional technology and tools and processes. You just can't do that in less than, 20 days. Like if everyone's apples to apples and they're doing all that risk and due diligence, it's going to be a big number. But yeah, I mean, the reality is we see a mix of how people do this as well. Some people register the suppliers, get them in, get them onboarded, they're ready to transact, issue purchase orders, and then they're doing a lot of that due diligence sort of in parallel, which is also a great model. But it's, anyway, no surprises. It's still just a little tricky to figure out what's happening behind the data.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the 2 polls we just had and setting the stage for the rest of the discussion. So I'll just, everybody knows Hackett, we love our data, right? So let me just share a couple of points of data that kind of set the tone as we have this conversation, right? Obviously, when we think about the supplier onboarding process, right, we're talking again about that process where, hey, we want to use a supplier, got to get them on board. Typically, we would, Conrad, to your point, include kind of the risk aspect of that, the due diligence we have to go through to vet our suppliers. If we hadn't done it kind of during the sourcing and selection process already to the extent, but usually there is still some actions that need to occur. So if we think about how companies kind of measure this process, and I've been at Hackett for almost 20 years now, and I remember one of the first requests I ever had from a client going back 20 years was, how do you improve this process, right? So this isn't new, right? This has been kind of a thorn in the side of procurement of the company for a very long time. And I remember 20 years ago going out with a study to kind of better understand best practices. So we've been focused on this for a while. The good news, I think the technology there is and we'll hear the story here, is getting to the point where, it's really kind of making some inroads and improving this process, managing both cycle times, which is kind of the #1 metric companies use to kind of show success of this process, but also the risk side, the quality side, right? And we see that as kind of the second metric that is used to support this. Interesting enough, you see almost a third of organizations actually ask their internal stakeholders, how satisfied are you with this process, right? Let us know. We want that feedback from you. So cycle times, quality, it's good to see the quality component up there of this process, and internal customer satisfaction tend to be those top three kind of metrics that companies look to kind of measure the performance of this process, the healthiness of it. The one I'll point out, I mean, you can kind of look at some of the others and they're kind of versions of, the same kind of metrics that we've just talked about. But the one I love is supplier satisfaction. 1 in 5 actually do seem to care about the supplier side, right? And their involvement in this process and level of satisfaction. Let me share one more kind of data point with you. I think the next question, this is going to set the tone for what we're about to discuss, right? I mean, what are the tools you use to support this process? And going back 20 years ago, when I first kind of got my feet wet with this supplier onboarding process, it was a lot of, very, very manual processes, right? This even says email. I'd argue 20 years ago, it was even mail, regular mail, right? So the number one tool tends to be email with some onboarding questions, some Word, Excel files. Obviously, we want to move away from that as much as possible. Good to see self-service portals kind of up there at the top. In a version of that, we could argue is the supplier information management solutions that we see one in 4 are actually using, purpose-built type solutions to support this process. I'll make a quick comment, and I'm not going to show the data. So we do tend to be moving towards a more automated process, which is great. You see ERP applications there. One of the telling studies, we've done a couple of studies that kind of highlight the supplier onboarding process technology space. It tends to be one of the biggest areas that organizations say, you know what, we're not getting the benefit. The way we're doing this, the technology we're using, we're not getting the benefit we thought. And it's also kind of correlate that with a lot of companies do try to use their ERP solutions or use kind of a general suite solution, kind of end-to-end solution they implemented. The fact is a lot of those technologies just don't have, this is a complex process and they just don't have the functionality that's needed. Hence the focus on some of these, purpose-built supplier information management solutions that are out there that are really addressing this. One more slide I'll show you before I turn it over to the main stars of the show. We just did a study that looked at, if we think about our broader source to settle technology projects, what are the non kind of financial, but yeah, we want to drive, benefits from it from a financial perspective, but what are those other kind of total cost of ownership objectives? And you see data quality, better supplier master information data as being one of those critical, kind of top 5 objectives we have for these programs. But it's also, if you look at the right-hand side, the biggest disappointment that we get out of these technologies. Half say we didn't get better data like we wanted to. Again, some of these purpose-built supplier onboarding solutions, like we're going to hear about today, do a much better job of that. All right. At this point, I am going to turn it over to you, Conrad, and let you introduce the star of the show for today.
Thank you, Kurt. I was just thinking about the data that you just walked through. We hear this dialogue all the time. It's so cool to see actually. I mean, cool to see bad stuff, maybe not, but to see that disappointment we in data, because we hear it in conversations all the time about, solutions that people are struggling with, that just weren't really purpose-built to solve the problem. I have to say, as we get in here, I love this word that got added into the title here, elevating strategic procurement, because you wouldn't know it by seeing Ian sitting in his chair there, but Ian is 6'11". Like, just let that sink in for a minute. Like, the guy is a giant. Well, not in a freakish way. Ian is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. He played basketball. He's a power forward. So in terms of elevate, this guy knows how to elevate. And he started his procurement career at Vivint, which is a home security company. He's now the head of procurement at HealthEquity. He is the proud and loving father of a couple of kids. The most recent is a beautiful baby girl. So we've caught him just before heading out on his on a paternity leave. So we're really happy to spend a few minutes with Ian. Ian, why don't you just, I mean, I kind of stole your thunder in terms of your kind of introducing yourself, but I'm sure there's other highlights that are worth pointing out. Why don't you take a minute and just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your procurement?
You bet, you bet. So when you mention elevate, I need to be extremely clear. I'm not elevating anything by a vertical or anything like that. It's just my height, right? Like that's all I really had going for me. But that's funny you said that. No, so I've been at Health Equity for close to 7.5 years now. I was brought on to Health Equity to really build a procurement function. At the time, Health Equity had about 600 team members, and we were doing procurement, not really procurement. We were getting invoices, just paying them. Nobody had any visibility. There was very little kind of going on, right? And so I was like the first procurement person that they hired, and and kind of my direction was, you need to go build a program, right? And so it's been an adventurous 7 years with acquisitions and things like that, but at the end of the day, it's been very fulfilling. We've been able to build something pretty cool here, Conrad.
That's awesome. I actually, when I left I'm a procurement guy myself. I started at Intel. I was at Intel in the procurement supply chain team for 15 years. I left Intel, and then I actually joined a small little local Utah company for 5 weeks before Adobe acquired them. But that was the remit that I got at that company, which is come in and build procurement. And I think that's one of the most exciting things to do, is to kind of build and transform and make procurement valuable and relevant to the organization. So as we go, I'd love to hear a few more stories about that progress, not just as it relates, of course, to this topic, but what a neat job to be part of.
It's been awesome. It really has been.
So tell us a little bit about, I mean, it's no longer 600 employees, right? HealthEquity's really changed over 7 years.
Totally. So Health Equity, for those who are unfamiliar, kind of we help manage tax advantage accounts such as HSA or FSAs, which are tax advantage within the U.S. Right. So we are a custodial non-bank for these funds, and really what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower healthcare consumers, and by allowing them to have control over their financial, like their medical financial situation. HSA is a really powerful tool to be able to do that. So it's cool to be part of a company that not only not only is profitable and things like that, but it's really striving to make an impact on particularly those in the United States. So it's a really cool vision, really cool company. Just north of 3,000 team members. Started kind of founded by Dr. Steve Neeleman back in 2002, went public back in 2014. As I kind of mentioned, when I started, there were 600 team members, and over the course of the last 7.5 years, we've made multiple acquisitions that we're now close, just over 3,000 team members, which is crazy. WageWorks was one of those acquisitions, as well as a company called Further. So just really trying to grow our our influence, so to speak, and get as many HSAs accounts as we can.
So I'll ask you, let's talk a little bit more about WageWorks in a few minutes, but I think that's about the time we met back in the day, is when you were dealing with the challenges of acquisitions. We included here a little bit more of the data view of Health Equity.
Yeah, so for sure. So this is kind of walking through a little bit of like the total HSA market. So with these acquisitions that Health Equity has made, we are, as of the Devenir report that just came out, we are the number one HSA provider we're the number one HSA provider. And that's a really cool place to be. So I've heard the stat that 1 in 7 Americans have our card in their wallet. Which is pretty amazing, right? And as I said before, Connor, like this industry will continue to grow as we try and find ways to solve the healthcare concerns or issues that there are currently in the United States. So really cool vision, really cool mission, and we're doing our best. We're doing our best here.
I've had an HSA plan for a long time, and I really like this idea of putting the power of choice back in the hands of the healthcare consumers. It's such an important but also emotional and challenging thing to manage in our lives. And I just like having more control instead of less control. Zero to do with procurement. I'm just curious. You mentioned you went out of your way almost to say a non-bank custodian of the funds.
Yeah.
I assume that means that the money itself sits in banks or something.
In custodial banks, correct. Yes, we have custodial bank partners that we'll kind of put that money with. But some of those we also have a little more flexibility as being a non-bank custodian, being able to like allow our members to invest and things like that. So it's a really cool solution.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I'm one of those 1 in 7 that walk around with a HealthEquity card in my wallet.
Love that.
So tell me a little bit about, like, again, kind of rolling back in time, what things were looking like when you showed up and in those early days.
Yeah, totally. So even before I met Conrad, we were tasked to building this procurement function. It was there was a lot of work ahead of us, right? Trying to get processes in place and try and position procurement in a really strategic place. We had around, as I said, in 2019, the WageWorks acquisition really threw this like front and center. So we acquired a company that doubled our size, doubled our operations partner. That's what we call our vendors, our operations partner, population, and we were using 2 separate systems. So HealthEquity had kind of created a homegrown SharePoint application that kind of helped us with general requisition to the kind of the P2P process, more or less. And then WageWorks was utilizing Salesforce with no real flow. We use NetSuite for like the procurement portion, but like contracting was somewhere else. It was just kind of all over the place. So when we come into this, we see 2 different solutions, and I can almost hear the groan from other people, like using Salesforce as procurement to kind of do that. That's how we felt as well. So came into this, stuff wasn't standardized. We had reviews looking a little different. Stuff was stored in different places. It kind of queued up like we needed a solution for procurement, security, privacy, and legal, and all these other accounts payables. These teams to be able to collaborate together and like find an easier way of doing things, I guess I'd say. Yeah, this is a. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to pass you into this content.
Yeah, so this is exactly right. So as we kind of came into some of these pain points, it was very clear, and you'll see here in a minute, like to onboard a new operations partner was such a laborious process. As I said, nothing was standardized. Folks were kind of doing their own thing. Like security didn't feel like they had a standardized process. And what we were finding is like we had such stale data, like our tax ID information, remittance addresses, banking information, all that stuff was kind of in a rough place where it was adding extra time as we had to go through and validate all of these before we actually issued a payment or before we created the profile. And as it kind of says here, like we were running into a lot of these issues, and we're pretty much tasked with, we got to fix this. We got to make this faster. We need to make this easier for our internal business owners.
So being in this financial services, financial technology, non-custodial bank space, security and privacy and data integrity, the compliance, all these things are super important. I remember back in those days when I first met you, HealthEquity had hired someone from the FBI to come in, and I mean they hired you to build procurement, and they hired someone from the FBI to come in and make sure that everything was done properly from a compliance and a risk perspective. How is that?
Totally.
How is that working with someone like of his caliber coming in, looking at this convoluted process that you guys were struggling with? What were his observations, and how did he impact the procurement process?
For sure. Yeah. So, and I think that was one of the keys here, Connor, that you highlighted is like, we brought in an expert from a InfoSec perspective, and he came in and saw what we were doing. He's just like, this has to change. And I really, he's now retired, but I really appreciated his approach that he's just like, the two of us were attacking this problem together, right? And it kind of set the tone for this program as a whole and kind of the maturity that we've seen. He came in, recognized some of the areas for improvement, recognized the lack of system support that we had, and he really helped drive that home. And at that time, when you make an acquisition from a security perspective, some you know bad actors see that as an opportunity to come in and like take advantage of kind of the chaos. And from his perspective, he was like, we need to get this under wraps quickly, and we need to make sure that the solution is giving us the visibility that we need.
I love that you guys were partnered so closely on this. I see less now, but I still see cases where procurement is kind of pointing fingers at the other functional partners who have requirements in the process. Like, oh, it takes a long time, or it's a bad process because legal or because privacy or because security, right? And I love your approach with him. That was let's work on this together, because ultimately the risk teams and the procurement teams have different responsibilities in making it work, right?
Totally. And one of the things you mentioned there that I just want to go into a little bit more, like even today, right? Like ever since, we kind of had this, as we kind of brought our teams together, that partnership and relationship continues to exist. Like procurement is seen as the face of the program. We are facilitating the program, and it's not, oh, InfoSec's taking forever, or, oh, this legal review is taking forever. It's, hey, let's come to procurement. Let us kind of work with the partners and allow us to kind of make sure we're prioritizing appropriately, so that it's not like a finger pointing game. And I think that really goes a long way, where we may take some of the brunt of that, but at the end of the day, it grows a deeper partnership with these different teams that we've got each other's back, and we kind of have a unified front, which makes a big difference internally.
This really starts speaking to the conversation that we had up front about F1 and the pit stop and everything else, right? Because we're the back office, we're the pit stop, but we have all these partners. And I would say in so many ways, procurement needs to retain the voice and view of the customer. Like we're so close relative to those teams. They're kind of a bit more back office compared to where we are. We're all in the back office, but we're a step closer to the customer. And I think some of the hardest conversations are helping the partners understand that there can't be an unlimited budget for risk management. If you were putting, if you're putting a rocket in space and people die if you make the wrong decision, of course, the level of, 12 nines or whatever level of quality they have to think about in that space is insane. And in those cases, you probably need to take 2 or 3 years to test everything. But in the case of procurement, and I'm not saying you don't need to do those things, we just need to help the risk teams come to the balance of, okay, what is the right level? Because what ultimately happens is you create a risk program that is more complicated than the business will tolerate, and then they just go around you. So there's this true diminishing return of risk mitigation when the business like throws up their hands and says no. Anyway, a little bit further down in there than I had thought to go, but that partnership you're talking about, if anyone's out there building procurement or building relationships with these partners, it is so important to do that. I think back in those days, what was his name? Last name was Bell. What was his first name?
Arnold Bell. Yeah, Arnold.
So I imagine you really are one of the nicest people I've met. I imagine you and Arnold hit it off pretty easily. But with your broader partners, because you have legal, you have a bunch of people that you work with, besides just being a nice guy, how have you invested to build those partnerships to make sure that they're supportive and collaborative?
You bet. And that's oh man, that's the question. I think I think really trying to articulate the value proposition of allowing us to do what we do really well, right? At the time, at least initially, and I've told you, I think I've told you this before, Conrad, but like for the last few years, procurement has been driving super hard to have strong systems and processes in place. And I think we are hitting this point of maturity where the business recognizes that we have strong processes and we have like a strong support structure to help people get these requests through quickly. Um, and it's allowed us to kind of make this transition, so to speak, of like we're like right on this edge of like true strategic procurement where we're getting ahead of these requests. And even more so, these partners that we have are even more excited for the position that we're going to be in because we're going to have front row seats and be able to loop them in much sooner. So if these last second requests are becoming less and less, right? So when I think of like our journey at Health Equity, it was like, just trying to get, we're trying to get like level set, understand the landscape, build strong systems and processes. And now we're moving into more of a strategic role where it's like, how do we get ahead of this stuff to let our other partners know this is coming down the line so that they can prepare on their side?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So I'm just gonna kind of jump into, and we're not talking a ton about Graphite today, but when you kind of went from that fragmented, lots of different technologies and solution, it was, I think you were already a year or two into your journey there, but we came together, we started building this partnership, and you started implementing kind of these purpose-built capabilities to fill those gaps. Why don't you take a few minutes and just kind of tell us about that journey?
Totally. Yeah. So as I indicated before, different systems and kind of I'm learning more and more the like kind of the key to the success that we've had with Graphite Connect is that we came as a group, as a team. It wasn't just procurement coming, it was procurement, risk, security, legal. Everybody came together and said, we have to figure out a better way because it's just not what we're doing now isn't working, right? So when we saw the Graphite solution, obviously we did an RFP. We looked at many other options, but the areas that are highlighted here are the reasons why we went with Graphite Connect, right? We wanted to be able to manage our supplier information, the idea of a network where our different operations partners can manage their own profile was very attractive to us to speed up the onboarding timeline. The trusted vendor profiles, like we wanted a true source. We wanted a source of truth that we didn't have. We had an ERP. As I said, as we got into this with Graphite, we found some stale data that has been cleaned up since, and we wouldn't have known, right? We wouldn't have known unless we went out and like we're asking for W-9s and things like that. So that was also a really important thing to us. Our risk management team, they utilize the functionality of the topic reviews and making sure that our partners are up to the needed level. As you can imagine, Health Equity, we kind of straddle two different industries, healthcare. So we have a lot of PII, PHI, and then we also have financial information, right? So making sure that our partners can really meet our needs from a security perspective is a very important part. Some of this other stuff, guided intake and orchestration, and then just like our overall supplier relationship. That's one thing we've loved about Graphite is being able to like turn on these different modules from time to time. We just barely turned on our supplier relationship module, and we're getting some really good feedback from our business that, oh, now we can actually see how our partners are performing, both how the business owner feels they're performing and how the partner feels they're performing. So overall, at that time, and even still, Graphite has fit very well into our roadmap, our strategic roadmap, to make this process really clean for our internal business partners.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been really neat to be on this journey with you as well, kind of through the initial phase and through the modules. I'm kind of kicking myself for not including a an actual image from the application of the 360 view, like the golden record and all of the things that come together, because it is amazing how powerful it is when you bring the data together in one place, right?
Totally.
Like, hey, how's the supplier performing? How much are we spending with them? You know, or have they passed the sanctions? And all that seems pretty basic, I think, to just say it. But when you see it, that's why I wish I would have put the picture. When you see it together on one page, you're kind of like, whoa, like this is what I've been looking for, right? Because day to day, all of us in procurement have gone through we almost do somersaults to bring all the data from different places together so that it's in one place and you can work with it and you can understand the supplier. Even, I think back of my years in procurement about walking into quarterly business reviews and the first question is, well, what did we do last quarter? Like, what did we decide? Who was going to do what? What was I going to do? What were you going to do? And like just something as simple as having a structured way and a place to keep track of the documents, the presentations, the tasks and the commitments. Like we're all trying to do 10 procurement jobs at the same time. And being able to have a system that makes it easier to do that job in a responsible, disciplined, organized way. Sometimes it's just that little bit more of help that you need in order to show up as an amazing professional versus a little bit scattered of, I don't know, where did that go? Like,
totally.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. So that kind of brings us to the summary of how things look. We started before with how things were in the beginning. How are things looking now, and kind of what are you thinking?
Yeah, for sure. And I probably jumped the gun a little bit, right? Like I feel like with our partnership with Graphite, right? So as you guys said, we got introduced soon after the Wage acquisition, so 2019. So we've been customers of Graphite for just over 4 years now, and to see the transformation from where we were before to where we are now, it's been pretty incredible, right? There is trust in the process. It's kind of like it's a staple now that like everyone in the company knows if you want to engage with a new operations partner, you need to go through this process. And I feel like that's a few things, obviously, because you have multiple groups that are showing a unified front, but on the same hand, we have seen the value of a standardized process that we can all collaborate on, right? So you have all this information. Security and risk have performed their review within Graphite. Legal has the ability, while reviewing a contract, to go in and look at that risk profile and see if the agreement's really matching up to what was answered. And it's helped us to be able to protect ourselves with different data addendums or data privacy agreements, BAAs, and things like that. And I think overall it has helped HealthEquity to be more secure, to move faster, and to be able to have a positive business owner interaction, or like to have a positive business owner experience. And so those are like the three things that people hated before, is like, this takes too long. We're secure, but it takes like the time it takes for us to make sure we're secure is taking too long. And the other one is, where do I even go? Where do I go to get this stuff figured out? So I hopefully that answers your question, Conrad.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I love that you're talking about is this collaboration between the teams, right? Because we talked before about how important that partnership is. And one of the things I love talking to our customers is just kind of seeing groups that have almost worked on different sides of the building before, and maybe they still do, but it brings them together into sort of this common objective of supplier management, which kind of starts at onboarding and moves through the process. So, here from of course, they wanted speed. You talked about speed. It's really kind of cool to see, like, just after implementing Graphite, you went, down to 28 days. And that progress just continues as you refine the configuration and the modules that you're using to get this thing down to 13 days. Like, this is stunning. Like, this is such a cool story.
Totally is. And that's the thing, is just I think it was just a couple of years ago, we were brought before our board. The operations partner program was brought before the board, and we've been able to show some of the benefits that we've seen, by all jumping on this system and this process, kind of all getting on board. and they were very impressed with the progress that they've seen, and they're excited for the future of what further efficiencies we're going to find with this. So.
Yeah, and I just want to call out relative to the data that we started with, Kurt, that this is 13 days all in. This isn't 13 days commercial data registration. This is all of those things that that you need to do in that process. So this is really cool. Congratulations, Ian, to you and your team. This is a really cool story. So tell me a little bit more about. So looking back now, there's a lot of people on the phone that are at the beginning or a different spot of your journey. And I don't think your journey is done, by the way. I think you're at best like 30% into this journey of transformation. It never ends, right? It always has to get better. But if you're kind of giving advice to your younger self in this transformation or anybody else, like what are these key lessons that you would share?
Yeah, this invest in data quality. I think that's good, but like I wish it would have been invest earlier in the data quality, right? Like I think one of the things that as procurement professionals, like we're used to operating pretty lean, right? Like we just kind of take it on and it's just like, okay, like we'll make do with what we have kind of thing and stuff like that. But there are ways that you can invest in your data and the process that aren't going to break the bank, that are going to drive you forward and allow you to kind of attack more meaningful initiatives. I guess I'd try and say, right? Like I wish we would have just done it sooner. And the business case wasn't there and things like that. But now, knowing what I know now, I would be taking this information to, if I had to do this over again, right? I would be taking this information and say, this is like the first thing we need to do, because get the team members, like get everybody on the same page, get everybody in the boat, and then start rowing in that same direction. And, for us, the tool Graphite helped us to all get in that boat and progress forward. So that's something that I would probably say to myself. And then this other thing is like, where possible, standardize and automate it, right? Like let's try and make good things easy and bad things hard. And if things are good, they should be easy and a team member should be able to find it quickly and run through that process. If it's bad and hard, let's do whatever we can to make that a difficult thing for them to do. And so that's obviously this last one, like if my security counterpart were on the call, this would be one of the things, is like the security features that we've been able to see have been great. Being made, like the checks and validations on banking information, tax information, topic reviews. There's a lot of really great things that I think that it's easy now to see the benefit, where at the time maybe it wasn't there. So hopefully that helps, Conrad.
Ian, I love that you started with data quality, because I think it's the foundation. And I talk to a lot of teams that are like, oh, well, I'll do the data thing after I implement my P2P, my Coupa, my Ariba, whatever. Or I've got this big ERP project, and I'm like grabbing my hair going, look, you're building a house on top of a foundation. You're going to have to go back and remodel that. And
yes,
the house will be better, faster, and cheaper if you get that foundation right from the beginning. So
totally. And I think that's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, is like we view Graphite, that is our standard. Like that is our source of truth, and it flows out to everything else, right? So that data being maintained by our partners flows to everything else, and the concerns of stale data, just like they're almost like they are much lower or non-existent at this point, because we know that they're managing their profiles. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, awesome. So we had you in our customer advisory board this week.
Yes.
And I was actually going to do this slide a little bit differently, but just let me ask you of what we talked about, and this touches on, I think, many of those items that were in the customer advisory board. What are you most excited about right now in terms of where Graphite's going?
You bet. So there were a lot of really interesting and engaging things that we talked about during that client advisory board yesterday. For us, one that's kind of near and dear to my heart is the 360 spend visibility, right? The trying to get the data that we need, actionable data that we need for different groups across the business is becoming more and more of a need. And having a single stop where they can come into, in this case, Graphite Connect, and be able to find that data is going to be pretty incredible. We're excited to be able to partner with you guys on that piece. One of the things I'll say, the second thing, I had two that are very close. The other one is the AI piece, right? You know, we kind of manage our contracts within the system as well, and some of the things that AI could drive is going to continue to help us find more efficiencies and be more effective at what we do. So it's pretty exciting roadmap. What are you most excited for, Conrad? I feel like I got to ask you. What are you thinking about here most?
You know, this, of course, I contributed to putting this list on the page. I mean, I'm very excited about all of these things. A year ago, I was a little bit of a skeptic of where AI was going to be the most helpful. And just like you're talking about, the advancements in AI and the ability to do things and make it work better, you know, in the process. You know, there's a lot of power from the ability to ask. I mean, you're talking about spend visibility with the generation of AI that we're implementing with Google. We have a partnership with them, and they're actually building this for us. It's really cool. We're a GCP platform company, and so our partnership is really deep with them. But you'll get to the point where you can just kind of ask Graphite some of these questions, even about data, and have it come back and visualize the data for you. I spend a lot of time laying in bed thinking about the bank fraud that's happening. Honestly, I mean, it's a little bit, it's the skeleton in everybody's closet that bad stuff's happening every day, you know, and if it's not getting through, they're knocking on the door of, you know, everybody's company that's on here today and everybody else. Like these, I've seen some things in some of the technology that we have shows images and videos that terrify me, because it put me like face to face with these individuals in other countries that have so little to lose and so much time on their hands. It's like they are a virus in their own. They just keep poking and poking and poking and poking and poking until they find a weak spot, and then they just start pulling that thread of the sweater until, okay, I mean, it's scary what's happening, you know, in our personal lives even, but here as well. So this is one that takes a lot of my mental focus, and I'm really excited about really being a global leader in stopping this bank fraud. You know, we're protecting hundreds of millions of dollars of payments every week, and making sure that it's secure. So I take that responsibility really, I don't know, it's a big deal for me. But all this is cool. I love that spend visibility as well. That's the image I wish that I could just kind of show everybody. But anyway, Ian, I know we're kind of coming to the end of time. We want to save a little bit of time for Q&A here. Thank you for taking a bit of time with us and sharing your story. Kurt, I'm gonna hand it back over to you.
Absolutely. Ian, thank you so much. And Conrad, great discussion. It's always exciting to hear the actual transformation that companies are going through, particularly in this area, which again is been around for a long time, but I think over the last few years, we've really kind of seen technology stepping in and developing capabilities that really help improve this process. You know, to Conrad, to your point, we want speed and quality, and that's, I think, what the technology is allowing companies to achieve. So we're at the Q&A component of our session. So those that are listening in, you can use the Q&A functionality in Zoom to submit questions. So please do so. If you have questions, go ahead and submit those through the Q&A functionality, and I will take a look. Quick question, probably for you, Ian, that I had is, and this is something that is not just related to necessarily supplier onboarding, but certainly the journey you have been on, the capabilities you've needed internally in terms of the skill sets and the people that you have in place in the procurement organization. And also now that you've kind of been on this journey and looking forward, kind of talk to me about, you know, kind of the talent and the skill sets. What's that people side look like when you think about kind of evolving the organization related to this process or just the broader change in procurement?
Yeah, you bet. So this is something I give a lot of thought to, Kurt, and thank you for the question. Like for me, one skill set that I feel like every procurement professional needs, and one of the ones that I'm looking for when I'm trying to fill my team, is customer service, right? Customer service and the ability to be able to connect with the business owner and just drive their, like, exceed their expectations, white glove, whatever it is, because I feel like that's how we position ourselves as really as like a resource to be able to help them move forward their deals, or to be able to move forward what they're looking to move forward. And it's a hard one to find. But I feel like that's for me, I'm kind of that's like one of the first things I ask is like, give me an example of when you've gone above and beyond in customer service and what was the outcome, right? Because those, I feel like that mentality in procurement is just so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting you said that. I mean, I think it very much ties back to kind of the F1 conversation that Conrad had, right? As procurement, we are, we're the pit crew, right? We're not necessarily maybe driving the car, but we're there to support it.
Totally.
And it actually takes me back to a conversation I had probably, oh gosh, going back a long time, but it's always kind of stuck with me. And it was the head of a large procurement organization, and his comment was, and I think you're right on, particularly in this process, stakeholders want it today, as we saw from the poll. But we have to kind of help them through this process and help them understand that there's things we need to do to protect the company. But his comment was, look, we need to kind of think about the fact that our customers, our internal stakeholders, they have options, right? Whether they do or not, whether they can onboard a supplier through another means or they have to go through us, we need to think about the fact and treat them like we're selling our services to them, and they have other options. If we can't meet those needs, they can go somewhere else. And again, his point was, whether that is true or not, that needs to be our mentality, that customer service level of support when we talk about these processes like supplier onboarding, which can be very, frankly, for a lot of our internal stakeholders, they can be very passionate about these processes because they impact what they are trying to achieve if we're taking too long. So I think that's a great thought. Conrad, anything to add to that?
Kurt, it's kind of fun at the end of the race when the winners, I don't know if you've watched, but the winners like go dive into the arms of the pit crew and the engineers. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Right. And it strikes me that the GOAT word is used in so many different ways here, but sometimes we're the scapegoat, like, oh, we failed in business, or our project was late, or what, purchasing took 90 days to get this thing done, right? It wasn't me, it was them. Like, procurement's the scapegoat. Or this other goat, like these are my heroes. These guys are the greatest, and they made this happen. They made this work. And I really do think it is possible to be the greatest, like to be that partner, to be the one that gets celebrated. Like, we should be celebrating the business wins right alongside our customers, because everything we're doing is enabling their success. And if we're not focused on that and delivering that, so I love the customer centric focus. We're here to do whatever it takes to help them win within the boundaries that we have to operate in. We help them do that and do it successfly. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Excellent point. And I love you tie it back to that F1. But we got about 2 minutes left. Let me ask one final question, because I know it's on the mind of everyone. It always is. And Conrad, you talked about it. What keeps you up at night is fraud, right? The potential for fraud. I'll ask you both, and I'll comment on this as well. And maybe Ian, I'll start with you. Over the next 3 to 5 years, right? These are crazy times, a lot of volatility, AI, anything you open and read is talking about AI, Gen AI. What do you think? You got fraud ever increasing, as Conrad ever talked about, better opportunities. Conrad, to your point, you can have an AI bot call you up and you think it's your boss. What's the most important challenge you think that's going to be facing procurement leadership and their teams, to be honest, over the next 3, 4, 5 years? What are your thoughts on that, Ian?
Yeah. So I feel like, and I'll kind of keep my answer brief here. Like I feel like the separation between strategic procurement and purchasing are going to be more evident and more needed. And when I mean purchasing, tactical day-to-day review of purchase orders, stuff like that, versus like the need for a strategic minded individual that can, or strategic minded team that can help us source the appropriate partners, the appropriate operations partners. I think honestly, in the next few years, especially with the generation of AI and things like that, like with AI kind of stepping up, there's going to come a point where we're going to start to see that separation from tactical to like value add strategic. And so it's I guess that's where I'd leave it from my perspective.
I think you're right on. Conrad, any quick comments from you?
I would say that we all lived through this challenge of Amazon becoming a thing, because everyone shops at home, they buy stuff on Amazon, and they come to work and they think, oh, it's like, that's their baseline, right? Amazon is the baseline, and purchasing is dumb because purchasing can't make it as easy as Amazon. Like, what we do is so much more complicated than buying, whatever you're buying on Amazon. Like, it is so much more complicated. There's so much more around it. And I think AI and all this hype that we're in right now is creating this next bubble of wild expectations that don't align with reality, right? We've got a lot of work to implement these new technologies in the next few years. It's not as easy as Ian and I were talking before. Is it contract spend? Is it PO spend? Is it invoice spend? Is it dollars out the door? Like, AI is not going to figure that out as easy as we think it is. And so questions and the hallucinations, and I'm not really trying to throw shade on it. I'm just saying there is a lot of work, particularly at a data level, to make all these technologies work. But in the meantime, our customers are going home and ChatGPTing their way to happiness and thinking like we're dumb because we're slow and we're behind and we're taking a measure to purge. I would just say this gap of expectations is a real challenge we've got to manage, and the customer relationship, the partnership and everything else is just huge. Like, back to what Ian said, the most important thing was the ability to connect and relate to our business partners and stakeholders and make sure they understand we're in it together, because it's their expectation gap is growing. I just want to throw one more thing. Of course, I would love to talk to everybody that's listening to this webinar now or in the future. Ian is one of the nicest guys I've met. He is headed out on maternity leave, but if you want to pick somebody's brain about this journey, and I mean, he's been super generous with his time here, but Ian, I'm kind of throwing you under the bus. I know Ian will be happy.
No, not at all.
I know Ian would be happy to connect with any of you if you throw him a link on a connection on LinkedIn and ask him other questions. He's happy to help all the time.
Totally.
Well, and at that point, we reached the end of the session. So I could talk to you guys all day, but unfortunately, that's not going to work. Conrad, Ian, I thank you very much. Ian, amazing story. Conrad, thanks for your leadership and insights. Holly, I'll turn it to you to kind of close everything out.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Kurt, Conrad, and Ian for your time walking us through the webcast. Thank you, everyone on the line, for joining today's webcast. Just a few quick reminders prior to signing off. We invite you to fill out the survey at the end of the sessions. Please let us know how we did, as this helps us improve future webcasts. Or if you're requesting CPE credit, please fill out the survey in order to obtain your certificate. Last reminder, the final deck and recording link will be emailed to all registrants within 48 to 72 hours of today's events. With that, thank you again, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.